Some roads forget you the moment you leave them. Route 66 isn't one of them. Every time my headlights hit empty asphalt now, I remember the night something barely alive sat breathing behind me. It was dark, and the road that night looked endless. Just a strip of dull light cutting through black sand and scrub. I'd been driving for hours, heading toward a small town near Flagstaff to visit my friend Scott. It was supposed to be an easy 4-day trip, but the highway had a way of stretching time until every minute felt the same. The radio drifted between weak country songs and static. The air inside the car smelled faintly of old coffee and smoke. I remember thinking how quiet it had become. I had not seen another pair of headlights for nearly an hour. The desert outside pressed against the windows like a weight, vast and soundless. There was no moon, only a thin reflection of my own headlights sliding over asphalt. At some point, fatigue turned the landscape into repetition. The same shapes appeared again and again. Broken fence posts, the glint of glass, a road sign bent from the wind. I was beginning to feel lightheaded when the need to stop became impossible to ignore. Up ahead stood a single leaning streetlight, the only mark of civilization I had seen since dusk. I pulled over beneath it and stepped out into air that smelled of dust and oil. The silence was heavy enough to hear my own breathing. The light above me buzzed, flickering every few seconds. Far down the shoulder, something moved. A man walked along the edge of the pavement, thin and slouched, a backpack hanging from one arm. His head was lowered as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. For a moment, I thought of calling out, but the emptiness of the place swallowed the impulse. He kept walking without turning his head. Within seconds, the dark closed around him again. I returned to the car and kept driving. The tires hummed against the surface, the same steady rhythm that had followed me all night. The streetlight vanished behind me. The road seemed to narrow, as if it were being folded inward by the dark. 10 minutes later, the headlights caught another shape on the shoulder. The same man stood ahead, his outline almost identical to before, backpack at his feet. Sweat glistened on his forehead, even in the cool air. I slowed automatically. There was something unnatural about seeing the same figure twice on a road that empty. The part of me that wanted to ignore it lost to the part that feared what might happen if I didn't. I stopped, unlocked the trunk, and let him place the backpack inside before he climbed into the back seat. He settled behind me in silence, the car filled with a faint odor I could not place. At first, it reminded me of damp clothes left too long in a closed space, but it deepened quickly into something sharp and organic, the kind of smell that sticks to metal. The miles slid by with almost no sound except the tires and the faint static of the radio. Every attempt to think of something ordinary, work, the route, the gas gauge, folded back into awareness of the presence behind me. The air grew thick, warm, hard to breathe. I rolled the window down slightly, but the smell did not fade. I told myself the man was probably just another traveler. The desert brought out odd people. Still, I could not shake the sense that he was watching the back of my head without blinking. My fingers stayed tight on the wheel. At some point, he shifted forward slightly. The movement made the seat creak. My stomach turned cold. I focused on the thin white lines ahead, counting them one by one. The music filled the silence, but the notes seemed distorted, as though the radio were picking up another frequency underneath it. The sound built in uneven pulses, rising and falling like breath. A sudden stillness followed. The smell thickened again, and the air temperature seemed to drop. I could feel his eyes through the mirror without looking, but instinct forced me to check. In that instant, the world narrowed to a reflection. His head was tilted back, mouth gaping toward the ceiling, skin stretched so tightly it looked translucent. His eyes had rolled upward, showing only white. No breath came from his chest, yet the flesh around his jaw trembled as if he were trying to inhale the entire car. The posture was wrong, broken, inhuman. I froze. The steering wheel jerked slightly under my hands. When I blinked, the reflection changed. He was seated normally again, head bowed, hands folded, motionless. The radio hissed softly, the same faint tune as before. Every nerve in my body told me to stop, to leave him there on the road. But the thought of stepping out into that desert with him anywhere behind me felt worse. I gripped the wheel and kept going. The smell seemed to settle over my skin like a film. Minutes blurred. My vision tunneled until all I could see were the dashed white lines flickering past. Somewhere behind me, the seat shifted again. The sound was small, but it carried the certainty of movement. My chest tightened. My pulse hammered in my throat. I realized the radio had gone silent on its own. The air inside the car felt wrong, as if pressure had built up without release. Then everything happened at once. A weight struck the back of my neck and shoulders. Hands pressed against my throat, forcing the breath from me. The grip was cold and slippery, like holding wet metal. I tried to yell, but the sound died against the pressure. The car swerved. Gravel spat from under the tires. My vision pulsed black at the edges. Somehow my foot found the brake. The car lurched forward, then stopped with a jolt that threw my chest against the steering wheel. The hands vanished. The smell vanished. For a long moment, I sat without moving. My heartbeat echoed in the shell of the car. The dashboard lights trembled faintly. I turned, expecting to see him crouched in the back seat, but the space was empty. The door locks were still engaged. The trunk light showed nothing through the small gap in the rear glass. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale. The cold air coming through the cracked window felt unreal, as though it belonged to a different place. The silence outside was complete. Even the insects seemed gone. When I could finally move again, I pressed the gas and drove. The engine sounded strained, each gear dragging like a protest. My hands would not stop shaking. I checked the mirror again and again, convinced that any blink might reveal him sitting there once more. Every flash of light across the glass looked like movement. The road eventually widened, and the faint lights appeared in the distance. Then a sign for the town where Scott lived. Relief came in waves, followed by exhaustion that felt heavier than the drive itself. When I reached the house, I parked and sat for a long time before knocking. The front porch light glowed weakly, dust swirling around it. I could hear my own breathing louder than the wind. I tried to explain what had happened. Words came out disjointed, like someone describing a dream they barely remembered. The longer I spoke, the less believable it sounded even to me. Every detail, the two sightings, the smell, the reflection, felt fragile in daylight logic. I expected someone to tell me I had fallen asleep at the wheel, that the mind creates shapes from exhaustion. But when we checked the trunk later that morning, it was empty. The mat was spotless, as though nothing had ever touched it. The explanation I wanted never came. The local police noted nothing unusual on the highway that night. No missing persons, no accidents. The smell that had clung to my clothes faded by evening. Only the bruises on my throat remained for a few days, shallow marks shaped like fingers. Since then, I have tried to piece together a version of the night that makes sense. Sometimes I think about how quiet the desert was before he appeared, and how complete that silence became afterward. It felt less like a person vanishing, and more like the road itself reclaiming what it had loaned for a moment. Years later, I still avoid driving after dark. I take detours, even when it adds hours. I tell myself it is only superstition, that nothing can happen twice. But certain things stay. The smell returns at random, faint but unmistakable, like heat rising from a sealed engine. It lingers for a few seconds, then disappears. When I close my eyes to sleep, I can still see the reflection, the jaw tilted toward the ceiling, the mouth stretched too wide for the shape of a human face, the eyes turned upward, white and unblinking, as if staring at something that only exists in the dark above the desert. I never use Route 66 anymore. The road feels alive in memory, a long pulse of asphalt that carries every sound I once heard. The buzz of a failing streetlight, the hiss of the radio, the drag of breath that wasn't mine.